As was just said, I'm Rich Waldron, co-founder and CEO of Tray.io, and today I'm going to talk to you about creating superheroes at work. So firstly, what is Tray? Tray is a general automation platform. Essentially, as you can see from the visual, hopefully, we make it easy to connect many different disparate data services, cloud services, some on-premise services, and we build in a bunch of connectors which carry out your typical programmatic functions, so looping, data storage, branching, things like that. What we're enabling here is that technically minded line of business users are able to interconnect all these different services and build automated workflows between different tools. We started out in 2012. We've raised over $100 million to date. We have over 150 people in the company as of this week. And we are headquartered in San Francisco with a big engineering office back in London. We serve a very broad base of customers, but some highlights, FICO, DigitalOcean, New Relic, and IBM. All that's very nice, but why? Why build this platform? Why try and solve this problem? We started the company like most British founders by selling Wellington boots on eBay. It rains a lot in the UK, and there's a big market for people that need Wellington boots. Raising money was tough back in 2012, and we found a way to finance the company that enabled us to use our engineering efforts to the maximum output. The first application that we built was a way of kind of building an automated email workflow. The early application was pretty successful. We had around 10,000 users sign up. We kind of went through all the trials and tribulations that you have as an early stage company, living in a warehouse, doing a bi-weekly run to the post office to sell Wellington boots on a kind of small British seaside town. And it was kind of during the creation of this application that we found ourselves writing these scripts all the time to carry out the tasks that we weren't able to get to, such as handling the shipping notifications for our side business. Meanwhile, the town that we were in was having a slightly different issue with its plumbing. A fatberg was building up in the local sewer, which is where you put all sorts of stuff you shouldn't down your drain, and it builds up in your plumbing system and causes huge issues for the local council to unpick. Interestingly, we had a similar problem building up with our little team and our little application. I've dubbed it SaaSberg. That's about as good as the puns are going to get this evening, I'm afraid. Certainly from me anyway. But we found ourselves, even as a small team, overwhelmed with the number of applications that were being used within each little department that we had. There was not only a huge amount of applications growing and a kind of specialization of SaaS throughout each part of the organization, but the same was occurring from a data standpoint. And we found that all the data that was trapped in our SaaSberg was inherently very valuable, but we couldn't utilize it very efficiently across the rest of the company. Here's the dog picture. And more often than not, this is how you feel as a small company, kind of fighting fires all over the place. And as it turns out, the same occurs at a big company. I've listed some of the different tasks that you're meant to carry out when you're scaling quickly, from employee onboarding, managing finances, dealing with product usage data, and how you go and charge your customers effectively. It's a very overwhelming feeling, especially when you have many different applications to manage at any one time. Turns out we weren't alone in this. Here are some statistics on the average amount of applications per department in your typical enterprise organization. Special shout out to marketing here with 91 different applications in the average organization, followed closely by HR at 90. It takes a lot of applications to keep people in order and on the right track. And this problem is only getting bigger. We're only sort of using more services. Specialization is becoming more and more prevalent. And as a result, we're building up a burgeoning amount of data in every different department within our organization, which really leads us to this problem of trying to figure out how we utilize it effectively. The best organizations that we've seen figure out how to carry out each one of these different tasks using all of the tooling and all of the data that exists within all these applications in the most efficient way possible. If you think about it, The difference between competing companies is really how efficient they are with their process, who is able to spend the most time focused on the things that are going to move the needle for the business. And when you have all of this data at your fingertips, what if you are able to build pipelines and build ways to automate these tasks and use that data to your advantage? And so if you can see with each one of these examples, there are multiple applications involved within figuring out employee engagement or prospect engagement and personalization. If you were able to utilize all that data, if you were able to use your skills as a marketer or as an HR professional or as a sales ops professional, and you understand the strategic side of what you're trying to do, but you don't have the engineering capability, you'd be far more effective as an employee, and therefore you would become a superhero. As we've also seen, companies that adopt this and figure out ways to build these sort of automations internally grow faster than anybody else. Your average organization that builds automated sales pipelines grows 2.2x faster than any other competitor. But doing that is not very easy. And this is kind of where the meat of the challenge comes in when you're building a product or a platform like Tray. Every single company has its own tool set, it has its own data set, it uses its own custom fields, it has its own records. Every single organization is completely independent, and the processes that each organization carries out are very bespoke and different. So the value that you need to bring here is customization. You have to figure out how to solve a problem in a way that puts the kind of hands back in the power of the employee. They need to be able to build out the workflows. They're the ones with the knowledge. They need to be able to utilize that in order to solve the problems that are in front of them. Some of you in the room will have heard something like this before, I'm sure. Integration as a category has been around for a very long time. There are many, many different applications that exist, typically in the IT arena, which enable you to connect disparate services together. What we haven't seen is how this could be utilized for people that aren't engineers by trade, but are technically minded, are capable, and they do have these problems. They are in different teams. They're not within the IT organization. If you think about that from a timing perspective, many things have changed over the years that have enabled a platform like Tray to exist, and frankly, we've been very lucky with our timing from that standpoint. Back-end infrastructure has changed considerably over the last 6-7 years since we've been working on this platform. You're now able to utilize things like serverless and containers and service-oriented architecture. But the real kind of key change is this citizen automator line you can see in pink here. And what we kind of define as a citizen automator is somebody that is technically minded, that is within a team that is not in the engineering or IT org. It's your sales ops professional, it's your marketing ops professional, it's the group of people that understand logic, they're very handy with spreadsheets, they build particularly gnarly macros, but they are hamstrung because they don't know how to build scalable back-end models, they don't know how to figure out what happens when an API fails, or what rate limiting is, and that's where a platform like Tray comes in. And so by definition, not all heroes wear capes. Not all heroes write code or wear capes. I knew I was going to get that one wrong. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of this. We touched on it earlier that within your typical enterprise HR org, there are 90 different applications. Some of the ways in which we've seen Tray utilized within some of the companies that we've mentioned is automating the employee onboarding experience. There can be many tools involved in that alone, from your HR platform through to your recruiting platform, and even your MDM provider or on-premise provider for configuring software. What we've seen is that the HR ops leaders and the technically minded users within these teams have been able to build supercharged workflows which automate the end-to-end process here. That can save many hours per employee that's onboarded. If you're onboarding 20 to 30 employees a week or a month or whatever it may be, you're saving a considerable amount of time. But the key here is that you're able to configure that around exactly how your organization works and the attributes that are different for your team. One of our customers was finding that they had to re-enter 30 to 40 different custom field data between platforms that already had a native integration. And so where you're able to design and build these kind of orchestrations or automations, you do save a lot of time. Another kind of more deviant example is a way to uncover the visitors to your website figure out if they are prospects or existing customers, and actually use that to your advantage as you go out and market to them. So I'm going to try a risk here and actually click through to go into our product. So bear with me a second. Okay, so here you have the trade platform. Let me just pull that over a little bit. Might be too tricky. So here you have the trade platform. Here you have your connectors, which are available on the left-hand side. Each connector is a wrapped-up application or a connection to an API or some form of logic. And I'll very quickly kind of walk you through a workflow which would help you identify an anonymous visitor to your website. So in this example, the trigger event is from segment. The segment call will allow you to pick up the IP address of the visitor to your website. In this instance, we're checking to see which page of the website the user is on, because we want to be able to determine if they're on a marketing page or a sales page. We want to be able to use that data later when we're prospecting. In this example, we're checking to see if they're on the home page. We're next checking a flag to see whether or not they visited the website before. If they haven't, then what we'll do is we'll go and look up the IP address using a service called Clearbit. Clearbit is a business intelligence API. It's a great tool. It allows you to, it has a very large database of organizations and the IPs that are tracked against them, and it will therefore tell you, okay, this person works at Nike or whichever the organization will be, and it will return that data back from the API call. We will then use a branch to determine whether or not the organization has over 50 employees, and we'll look up that organization in our HubSpot instance. We'll see whether or not they already exist within our HubSpot. If they do, we will set the flag that they visited the website again, and we'll be able to use that in our next outreach or the next prospect call that we set up. If they don't, we'll create the company within HubSpot, and we will prospect that company. So the prospect API allows you to then go and look up the individuals that work in a specific team, and it will return you all of the data behind who the individual is, what their email address is, what their job title is. We are then able to use that data and loop through it to add every single record into HubSpot, so we now have visibility into who's visited our website, when they turned up, which team they're in, and we can use that as we go out and go to market. And that's just a simple example of a workflow that can be built. It handles all of the engineering and the challenges around managing each API in the back end. That's the piece that Trey does. But it enables you as a technically minded professional to utilize skills that you have within your own sort of strategic armory to go out and carry out workflows like this. Goodness knows how I'm going to get this window back. Yep. Okay. Okay, and so that's the summary. We're over at Trey, we're all about building superheroes at work. We're trying to find ways that we can bring the power of engineering and the power of process and APIs into each department, and so that we can enable you to go and build your own automated organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How technically minded does one need to be to do this? Not in theory, but I guess across your user base, are those people that just know nothing about tech that can do this?
Yeah, good question. It's typically people that have no understanding of technology or don't use tools in any way and are really not suitable for a platform like Trey. There's sort of a broad base from your engineer that really doesn't want to be the person that gets lumbered with having to solve the integration headache and will have their code tied to them for next time it needs to be fixed within the team that they've been called into, through to where we see the sweet spot, which is that ops type role. It's as I kind of described earlier, it's somebody that understands logic, is used to moving data around and understanding kind of the hows and the whys behind it. Typically we see people that are quants or particularly useful with spreadsheets and can build heavy Excel models are a really good Trey user. On our back end, we actually have built our own scoring models, which will detect, dependent on the types of workflows that you're trying to build and the way you use the product, we assign a score which helps us determine how complex you are, how technical you are, and how much sort of support to provide in application and where to take you next in the product.
Is that right? You track me, and like if I suck, you give me more support?
Yes.
That's awesome. I may need that. Do we have questions? Actually, this somebody who has not asked a question.
Hi, thanks. This is very interesting. I was just curious about how many connectors you have, and are you constantly building new ones, and what's the range of capability? I've tried some. I don't know if you. I don't think it sounds to me like you're much more sophisticated than say IFTTT or Zapier. But what's the limit on what you can do out of the box?
Yeah, sure. So from the connector perspective, we have over 450 native connectors today. We also have universal connectors which allow you to essentially call any HTTP endpoint or OAuth into any application. So if we don't support a connector natively out the box, there is always a way to effectively extract the data. Be it we have a CSV connector which we were tested out, a customer tested us on very recently by dropping a 4 gig CSV file into that to see if we could batch it up and break it up and put it into a Redshift database, and we were able to do so. Tray is far more akin to a MuleSoft or a TIBCO out the box. The history and the way in which we've developed the product was to be as malleable and as powerful as possible, and we're really trying to solve the problem for large companies. So it's mission critical workflows, it's high throughputs of data, kind of billions of events, tens of thousands of transactions a second. That's how we've architected to solve for those issues.
Over there.
Hi, I have kind of a twofold question. One of these things is like user experience. I mean, you got enabling the user to do a lot of things, but from an enterprise standpoint, there's risk in having users just go do this. It's kind of the same struggle when you have with AWS, where you get sprawl and you give people enablement. And wow, you want to cultivate that genius, but what kind of controls can you offer an enterprise to make sure the data doesn't leak, if you will?
Yeah, great question. We've spent a lot of time on this. The organizations aspect of our product allows essentially permissioning and roles at many different levels. And as you've rightly pointed out, if you're selling into an enterprise organization, an IT org is absolutely going to be part of the buying process, at least to sign off the product. So we ensure that we kind of satisfy the demands from that perspective. It comes down to the scopes and the limitation of the API access the individual user has, and that's usually a good guide as to whether or not they are going to be the type of person that could cause a problem or cause a headache using that data. If somebody has full API access to an application within an enterprise organization, then my argument would be that they're likely doing this sort of stuff with or without Tray. What Tray allows you to do as an admin is see every single transaction that runs through the product. You have full rollback capability, and we've tried to safeguard this as much as possible so that in the event there is someone builds a workflow that they shouldn't be able to, you as an admin are able to lock that down, control it, roll it back, do whatever you need to from the off. But really that needs to be built in from the admin level once you're setting up your account, and that's what our team help those sort of administrators do.
Thank you. Great presentation, great product. With the automation usually comes a lot of bugs, a lot of unexpected outcomes, right? Especially when you give it in the hands of people who don't necessarily think about bugs on a daily basis. So what does the product provide in terms of being able to catch them or, kind of unexpected outcomes from the flow?
From the API layer, or what sort of bug would you kind of indicate?
Well, like you were sort of defining that you can literally create customer interactions with Tray, right? So you can automate something like a sales process or something like that. So something like a wrong message out to a customer or something along those lines, right? Would the product be able to help identify that, hey, perhaps it's analytics within the flow to, hey, there's something going on here that all these people are going into the flow, but nothing's coming out.
Yeah, so there's a few ways that we go about that. There are some checks we have that kind of run whenever you're compiling a integration. We look for certain error codes or certain expected behaviors from each API. When we build a connector, we set rules within that which will assure that you mainly abide within rate limits or whatever else, which is typically the most likely bug that you'll run into. What you're also able to do is define and build workflows for how you want to manage different types of errors. So you could actually build a workflow which says, if we continually get a non-existent user error or something of that ilk, then carry out this action, and therefore you're able to decide whether or not you want to skip that error, whether or not that's mission critical and it needs to ring everybody in the company. Whatever the determined outcome is, you're able to kind of bake that into the workflow. The sort of vision from our perspective is that we want to build this in such a way that enables you to have no restrictions to how complex you want to be, and you as the individual, the team, can work together to build these workflows and kind of bring them to life without us meddling too much with a kind of black box technology which says, hey, you shouldn't be doing that action, it shouldn't be working in that manner.
All right. Thank you so much. This was terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.